Hello, welcome to the online curriculum on common factors in case management in work with children and families. The common factors model identifies 4 elements of psychotherapy associated with good outcomes. In this module, we apply this model to case management in work with children and families. The 4 factors are the relationships of service users and service providers, external influences, service users and service provider expectancies, and service provider skills and techniques. The Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work, Twin Cities, USA, sponsored this module. The center works to contribute to the well-being of children and families who are involved in child welfare systems. The center offers educational services to human service professionals, fosters collaboration across systems and disciplines, informs policymakers and the public, and contributes to the child welfare knowledge base. The authors and developers of this module are Alankaar Sharma and Gilgun, both at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities School of Social Work. Mr. Sharma and Professor Gilgun are social workers. Both have worked as case managers with children and families in child welfare settings. Alankaar Sharma is a PhD candidate at the School of Social Work, University of Minnesota. Besides child welfare, he has experience as an advocate and trainer in prevention and intervention in South Asia and the United States in the areas of child sexual abuse and other aspects of children's well-being. Jane Gilgun is a professor at the School of Social Work, University of Minnesota. She has done research and evaluation on child and family programs and on how persons overcome adversities for more than 25 years. She has also been involved with several agencies in Minnesota that work with children and their families to improve the quality of their lives. After successfully completing this online curriculum, you will have developed skills in using the 4 factors in your work with children and their families. These factors do not operate in isolation, but work together. The 4 factors are relationships between service users and service providers in work with children and families in child welfare settings, expectancies and motivations, which refers to service users and service providers' expectations and motivations about their work together, including whether or not they are optimistic about outcome, external influences, that are factors that are external to the service user-service provider relationship that affect intervention outcome, and techniques and skills that service providers use in their work with service users. These factors do not work in isolation from each other, but work together. For example, service provider skills can contribute to building working relationships and in locating resources that enhance family and child functioning. Service provider skills can also enhance service user expectancies and motivations about the social services offered. This module is based on the common factors model of psychotherapy developed through work of researchers such as Lambert and Frank. These researchers analyzed hundreds of individual research reports on psychotherapy outcomes and found that 4 factors account for client change. As stated earlier, the factors are relationships, external influences, motivation and expectancy, and practitioner skills. In this module, we apply this model to case management in work with children and families. We discuss each factor in some detail in this module. We will now apply the common factors model of psychotherapy outcomes to case management with children and their families. The common factor model is consistent with social work perspectives that emphasize relationships and the importance of contextual factors in understanding and working with clients, and also in what the outcomes might be. Service professionals also are aware of the importance of service users' engagement in services. The common factors model, therefore, is familiar to most social work providers. Within social work, human functioning and development is thought to arise from interactions of persons with their environments. Environments are composed of the many settings and situations in which persons live their lives, such as families, communities, peer groups, and other social institutions. Policies, laws, and commonly held beliefs regarding race, gender, ethnicity, citizenship, ability, and social class have enormous influence on individuals, their situations, and their life changes. For instance, social service professionals spend considerable time and effort in identifying and seeking out resources for family, making referrals, and in advocacy. Such efforts are characteristic of social work and stem from the understanding that persons are inseparable from their situations. Social work has taken a strong anti-oppression stance and thus seeks to challenge power structures that disadvantage children and families. Social work also has a long tradition of emphasizing the importance of relationships with clients. Helen Harris Perlman is one example of many social work scholars who have discussed relationships. Whether clients engage in services is also a factor social workers widely recognize as significant to outcome. Social work skills, of course, are of obvious importance. The common factors model contributes to social work case management by highlighting and elaborating upon factors service professionals already recognize, often on an intuitive level. Human service professionals know from experience that relationship with service users is key to good outcomes. Take a moment to reflect on your professional experience and knowledge and think about the relationships that you have had with service users. Are relationships important to your efforts with service users? Did service users' willingness to engage in services have anything to do with the outcome of the case? What about circumstances outside of your control? Outside the control of service users? Did you find services to be adequate and appropriate? Did you have the skills necessary to meet the demands of your cases? Helen Harris Perlman, a social work practitioner and professor, discussed in some detail the importance of relationships in human services. According to Perlman, relationships are reciprocal and require the efforts of service users and service providers. Relationships begin to form when providers demonstrate capacities to understand service user issues and also demonstrate competence to be of service in dealing with service user issues. Service users have life challenges that require the help of others. Warmth, safety, and security are required for service users to enter into relationships with providers and then to identify and deal with problematic issues. Perlman recognized service users' vulnerabilities when they are involved in social services. When seeking or being required to seek professional help, service users may feel frustrated that they cannot handle the challenges by themselves. They may also feel guilty, angry, and ashamed. Good working relationships provide the warmth, safety, and security required for service users to identify the issues that contribute to the problematic situations and then to deal with them. For example, it can be hard for clients to manage difficulties with mental health and chemical dependency, and even harder to deal with contributing factors. To engage fully in services meant to help client manage such conditions, a safe and secure working relationship with service providers is most helpful. Perlman's perspectives are relevant to child welfare practice, where service users are typically both parents and children, where parents have abused and neglected their children and the children have been abused and neglected. Parents involved in child welfare systems may be terrified at the prospect of losing custody of their children, or they may already have lost custody. Children too may be traumatized by abuse and neglect, and then traumatized again by out-of-home placement. Relationships that offer safety and security are of obvious importance in such situations. Carl Rogers, a psychologist who worked alongside of social workers in family service agencies, developed the concepts of empathy, genuineness, warmth, acceptance, and active listening. These qualities are the building blocks of helping relationships. Not surprisingly, Rogers' views on relationship are similar to those of Perlman. As Rogers acknowledged, his theory of relationships is based largely on what he learned through his association with social workers. Ronald Rooney, a social work professor and scholar, has developed principles of work with involuntary clients, which much of child protection services is. He stated that service providers can build relationships with involuntary service clients through showing empathy for clients' life circumstances and respect for their cultural practices. This requires an understanding of their social, economic, and political environments, including paying attention to institutionalized oppression factors such as racism and sexism. Service providers can develop good working relationships with service users if they understand service user social, cultural, political, and economic contexts. In child welfare practice, building relationships with frightened and traumatized service users is challenging. Perlman's model states that service users must engage in relationships with service providers before they can get involved with identifying and dealing with troubling situations. When service users experience helpful outcomes early in the relationship, this builds trust and hope that services will bring about changes that service users want and that benefit them and their families. Working with parents who are alleged to have abused and neglected their children requires working relationships in order to help parents cope with their anxieties and fears and make positive changes towards children's best interest. Outcomes are likely to be good when service users actively engage in relationships with service providers. If parents cannot engage in relationships and if they cannot engage in problem-solving activities, then their outcomes are likely to be poor. Service is enhanced when providers have positive relationships with children. Children require the safety of secure relationships in order to work through the effects of trauma. The first step towards successful work with children is to begin to form relationships of trust. This may involve one-on-one time with children, involving them in activities they enjoy in order to build relationships. Careful attention must be paid, however, to showing respect to parents and foster parents and to complying with agency regulations and policies. Some researchers have focused on the characteristics and qualities of service providers such as empathy, positive regard, non-possessive respect, and emotional support, among other provider responses. Researchers and scholars such as Perlman recognized the reciprocal nature of service user and service provider relationships. Other scholars have developed this idea more fully. Some contemporary researchers examine the therapeutic alliance, or the relationships between service users and providers instead of provider characteristics alone. This means studying how both service users and service providers respond to each other as they work together toward common goals meant to help the service user to deal with difficult situations. The outcome of therapy or any human service is a product of relationships, along with the other three factors that appear to be common across helping relationships. Service providers may be highly skilled, empathic practitioners with a long history of successful work, but they will not be effective if service users are unwilling or unable to engage in services. Sometimes, part of the skill set of providers is the capacity to identify and deal with issues that interfere with service user engagement in services. There are some things that providers can do in these circumstances. Service users may not have accurate understandings of the professional roles that the service providers play. For example, there is a popular notion that child protection social workers take children away from their parents. Parents accused of child abuse and neglect may therefore refuse to cooperate with their service users. If service users have mistrust of other governmental departments or services, or have had negative experiences with governmental departments or services in the past, they may not participate willingly in professional relationships with service providers. Often, social class, culture, race, and immigration status are significant barriers to the formation of relationships. Stressful situations may be obstacles to building relationships, such as illness and incapacities within themselves or other family members. Stressed and preoccupied, service users may be unable to respond to additional services. There can be numerous reasons why service users may not fully participate in relationships with service providers. These situations can be challenging and difficult for service providers in child welfare settings because their relationships with service users can have serious impact on the well-being of children. Service providers have to use a holistic approach to identify, evaluate, and address these challenges. Knowledge of these challenges also helps providers understand why they sometimes do not succeed in building fruitful relationships despite their best efforts, since they are only one part of the relationship with service users and therefore are not solely responsible for the success of the relationship. Occasionally, they may even have to decide that their services and resources can be better offered to other clients. They may terminate services knowing that much has been left undone. Research shows that relationships contribute a great deal to good outcomes, but sometimes relationships can be difficult to build. These findings support social work's long-held principles about the importance of relationships for successful outcomes. The first step in service provision is access to clients. This sometimes is more difficult than it seems. In the video available through this screen, Dylan DePrima, a case manager, talks about client access. Dylan's program, called All Children Excel or ACE, is long-term and works with the highest risk children and families in Ramsey County, Minnesota. The purpose of the program is to promote child, family, and community safety and well-being, and to divert children from juvenile and adult correctional systems.
Without relationships, there are no services. And for services to start, case managers have to have access to the children, which can often be harder than many people realize.
And the part that really stymies us or hinders our progress is when the parent's not cooperating and then they don't grant us access to their child.
Right.
Then we don't get stuff done.
Or they withdraw services too.
They withdraw services.
In actual practice, the four factors are connected. In the video available, Dylan DePrima talks about how he tries to build relationships with children through connecting children to community resources and building on children's interests and competencies.
The four factors are connected. As this clip shows, relationships, external influences, and building on client strengths or client interests are all part and parcel of a common factors model and work with children and their families.
We're going to go to another dimension and look at healthy development.
Right.
And we're going to connect that kid to the community. We're going to connect them, whether it's to a karate instructor or to somebody at the library or to some sports team, or maybe it's just connecting them to art, putting them in some art classes, anything like that. But we connect them to healthy development stuff, and then we additionally do it with them. So like last week before the new year, we had a craft fair here, or craft day, but they made gingerbread houses.
Wow.
And then that was the week before Christmas. Last week before New Year's, they went to that new Princess and the Frog movie, and they all had lunch at Culver's.
Wow.
And kids were in here on the internet. But it's that group, outing, that time with your case manager that you get one-on-one as a, or as a group that really matters. So, and the kids are able to connect more, you know. So one of my favorite things to do was just find whatever that kid is really interested in, and then go do it with them.
Right.
So if it's playing catch, it's playing catch. I've taken kids to skateboard parks. I've taken kids to Timberwolves games.
Right.
I've taken girls to the mall, unfortunately. I mean, whatever it is. You know? So we try and find that niche, and then continue that relationship with them. So.
Relationships as factors in good outcomes includes relationships with children and their families and with other service providers. In the video available here, Gala Ingram talks about a case that is going well. She shows how relationships and external influences are connected.
I'm really happy with, I will call her Bree, my young girl. She is 12 and in 6th grade. I wouldn't say that she's necessarily stable, but the reason I'm happy with that case is because I have an excellent relationship with her mom, the school, her therapist, and herself. I think there's a lot of good communication between all parties. I feel like mom trusts me and trusts my advice.
External influences by themselves account for more of outcome than relationships. External influences include social policies, immigration and refugee status, agency influences, quality and availability of social services, extended family and community emotional and instrumental supports, and favorable or unfavorable life circumstances. External influences can also negatively influence outcomes of your work with children. For example, if a child becomes a gangbanger, this might promote antisocial behavior. She or he might become a substance user and start stealing money from his foster family to feed her or his substance use habit. Another possible negative external influence can be the death or incapacity of one of foster parents who until then had provided safety, stability and consistency. Children may have to move to other families or to group homes. Deaths of parent figures combined with the stress of moving into a new foster family might lead to involvement in antisocial behaviors if children cannot find positive ways of dealing with these stressors. When case managers see that things are not going well, they can advocate on behalf of children. For successful outcomes, case managers have to know what is going on for children and their families and be prepared to advocate. In an ACE case, Marietta and her 9-year-old son Jackson were doing well once Marietta left her abusive husband and, with the help of social services, found an apartment, quit using meth, and enrolled Jackson in a school that could meet his special needs. Her older son Smokey had been in a group home but had returned to his family and was doing well. Marietta worked a responsible job and supported her family. She had an order of protection against her husband Raleigh, whom she was in the process of divorcing. She had an excellent working relationship with her ACE case manager. Then, her older son Smokey was killed in a hit-and-run accident when he was crossing a street. Marietta immediately allowed her husband Raleigh back into the home. She was sometimes glassy-eyed and close to incoherent when the case manager visited. She managed to show up at work every day. Jackson began skipping school, and when he was in school, he acted out repeatedly. Her ex-husband roamed the city looking for the car that had killed Smokey. The relationship with the case manager remained excellent, but Marietta and Jackson are not doing well, and Raleigh was in an angry, agitated state. At the moment, the family is in a prolonged crisis. The case manager is a stable factor in Marietta's and Jackson's life, although Raleigh does not engage in services. The accidental death of Smokey is an example of an external factor that is having a profound impact on service provision. The video clip available through this screen shows how a case that has gone well can start falling apart when the medication that a child takes is not what he needs.
There are many external influences. Medication is one. Medication usually works, but sometimes it doesn't.
It's kind of been, mom was not able to handle him at home, so we made a psychiatrist appointment and got him back on medications. Since he's been put on meds 2 or 3 months ago, he's been in there several times. He's also been exhibiting self-harm behaviors. He's been hitting his head against the walls, trying to strangle himself with his t-shirts or his sweatshirts, and has just been, like I said, just going downhill way a lot.
Children spend many hours a day in school. Schools are an important external influence and are important to case outcome. In this video clip, Gala Ingram discusses a case where a change in schools brought about dramatic changes in a child's behaviors. Gala also said that her relationship with the child's mother had become more trusting and oriented toward problem solving, which could also have been a factor in the child's improvements in well-being.
Paula Ingram gives an example of the importance of external influences.
Nervous for her to go there because it'd be her first time in a suburban school setting, and she's, you know, a level 3 IEP. I was really, really worried. You know, she's African American, school is majority Caucasian. I had a lot of concerns. But it's actually turned out to be pretty good for her personality, and so even though she's still having, you know, explosive episodes, they're fewer. They don't last as long. She's more willing to process through it afterwards.
The skill set of case managers is another factor in good outcomes. Empathy is widely recognized as an important skill. It requires service providers to understand the situation from service users' perspectives. Developing empathy towards service users requires not just an understanding of the person's immediate contexts, but also an appreciation for the person's social, political, economic, cultural, and historical contexts, since the problems that service users are facing are often rooted in these structural factors. When service providers are empathetic towards service users, they can not only understand their situation better, but can also come up with better intervention plans that address each service user's unique needs and issues. Empathetic understanding of service users' contexts carries immense potential for development of mutual and strong relationships between service providers and service users. Another important skill is active listening. Active listening refers to paying close attention to the service user's verbal and nonverbal communication and appropriately responding in ways that communicates to the service users that you are trying to understand their issues and concerns by listening carefully. It tells service users that you take them seriously. Case managers' skills also involve knowledge of available resources and how these resources can contribute to service user well-being. Case management also involves skills in advocating for clients and for collaboration with other service providers. In the video clip available here, Leslie Norsted, an attorney for a program that works with high-risk children and their families, explains some of the skills associated with good social service outcomes.
Skills and optimism are important components of the four-factor model.
The case manager needs to be optimistic. They need to stay positive despite the fact that there are going to be a lot of negative turns in the case over time. A case manager needs to have the ability to call people on behavior that's inappropriate, but to do it in a very diplomatic way. So to respond forcefully, but in a way that is understood and absorbed better by the child or parent in that instance. A case manager needs to have thick skin. When ACE children are angry or upset, they say things that they may not mean, that are hurtful and that can be personally insulting and difficult to hear.
Do you have an example?
Just very small example, but just today I was reading a case note from a case manager. We went to see a girl at school, and she told him no, and used a whole lot of profanity, and then started commenting on his physical appearance, telling him how ugly he was, and that she didn't want to have him around because he was so ugly. And I think she refers to him as that white boy. So those kinds of things are things that a case manager just needs to take in stride as they continue to build relationships with kids who have very poor social skills.
Both service users and service providers either begin with or develop optimism, hope, and expectancies that their work together will be beneficial. This is an important factor in good outcomes. Working in the field of child welfare can be quite challenging for the service providers. Often, they have to work with individuals and systems that can be non-cooperative or under-resourced. The social situations they have to work with are typically very complex. Micro-level vulnerabilities are often created or enhanced by structural forces of oppression on the basis of people's sex, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, culture, disability, age, etc. These macro-level structural factors leading to oppression are unfortunately quite robust and difficult to challenge. Working in these circumstances can be overwhelming, but it is critical for service providers to be hopeful and resourceful in overcoming these challenges. Supervision plays an important role in this regard. Service providers can seek mentorship and guidance from their supervisors. They can also seek support of their professional peers to help address a situation or a problem when they find that it is too difficult for them to handle it alone. Many service providers use humor to cope with the stressful situations that are often a part and parcel of their work with children and their families. In this video, Donnie Preston gives an example of a teenage boy who asked for the support of a case manager. The 15-year-old boy showed motivation to connect to a positive adult. This is an example of service user motivation as one of the 4 factors in good outcomes.
Service user engagement is key to good outcomes.
And I guess some things were going on in his life and at school that he felt he needed some extra support. So he did the correct thing, the very adult-like thing, and called me and said, this is what I need. I need to meet with you. I need you to support me. I need for us to set up some kind of system where if I do a certain amount of good things that I'm rewarded with basically time with you. Whether it's a dinner or we just hang out. He just wanted that connection with the positive adult in his life that he felt that he was missing.
Service user optimism is important in good outcomes. In the clip you just saw, Donnie had hope that the boy's desire to engage in services would lead to good outcomes. In the video clip available through this screen, Dylan DePrima also shows optimism about being able to help children despite obstacles.
They let us work with their kids, we can get a lot of stuff done still.
Good.
Even if mental health is not always being addressed, we can still move towards that.
As we have shown, the common factors work together. We are now going to show an extended case study that shows when the factors are in a positive direction, children and their families have good chance of having optimal outcomes. In this case discussed through the video, the 4 factors were in a positive direction and coordinated. Betsy, the case manager, has good reasons to be optimistic about this case.
I have a little girl who is now 9 years old. She had severe tantrums when I got her case about 2.5 years ago. She could not be in school. She was in the learning center. She was always in the intervention room. She had rotten teeth when I got the case, and she was the only girl in the learning center. So all these kind of factors kind of played into how I got the referral.
The family moved and the child had to go to a new school.
When we moved her to the new school, she completely changed. By this point, her teeth, the rotten teeth, were removed. She had gotten teeth cleanings. She had gotten cavities filled. She was in a learning center with probably like 5+ girls in her area. She had staff that were really supportive of her. The team, they really kind of not catered to her, but they really were able to assess what her needs were and really work with them in that sense for her strengths and to have her succeed. By the end of the school year, she had not had any tantrums at school. She, her grades were wonderfully. Her teeth were good, and she was actually moved from like a level 3 setting from IEP to even the school all the way down to completely mainstream. She is now completely mainstreamed. She does have social work minutes that she's able to see the social worker, so she does have the lowest setting of an IEP, a level 1 setting, so that she can get that help if she needs it. But there have been no tantrums. She's doing beautifully. She has a lot of friends at school, and it's an amazing case.
Yes. Also, the relationship with the case manager changed over time. At first, the mother merely tolerated Betsy and let her work with her child, such as getting dental care and working with school personnel. But over time, the mother started to talk to Betsy about issues related to her children and to her work and to her housing. And she and Betsy did establish a working alliance that probably also had an effect on how well the child did in the new environment.
Mom coming around, mom being willing to work with me, being willing to find the services that they need and really utilize me for why I'm involved with them, and just really taking advantage of recommendations and working with like social service agencies that could come in to do skills work with her and the kids.
This case is a good example of how the common factors work together to produce good outcomes. We can only hope that the common factors continue to be as positive as they are at the moment.
We now will talk about the common factors and clients' future. Service providers think about clients' futures in terms of the four-factor model, especially relationships, motivation, and external influences. This video you will now see shows how a probation officer thinks about a 19-year-old young man who had been a long-term client in the Child and Family Program that case managers and the county attorney have discussed in previous video clips.
In this clip, a probation officer talks about a young client she has worked with for about 6 years. This young man had been a client in a Child and Family Program. It's the same program that the case managers we've interviewed work for.
Well, I would say just to kind of continue what he's been doing. I mean, that he's in school. He knows getting his education is important, that he gets the high school diploma. He's also talked about going on to military or to doing some more education. Working, I think, is a good thing, that he continues to have the work history that he's worked really hard at developing, and that he just continues to put himself in good situations and not kind of go back to just his kind of old way of life of the criminal behaviors, that he stays focused on his future. I think those are all good things, and he'll do well.
How about maintaining a relationship with his girlfriend, who seems to be a good influence? She's working, she's going to school, her family is stable.
I think that's important to find those relationships that are positive, and that people are doing well. I think it's still good for him to be in contact with his family too, because I think he does see them as a support,
Right.
And kind of at this age now understand some of their struggles, but still that they're supportive and they love him and they want him to do well.
No one can foresee the future, but it is likely that the young man discussed in the previous video will remain law-abiding if he continues on his present path. He is in school, working, and has strong relationships with positive people, has a family who loves him, and is optimistic about his life chances. The Common Factors Model identifies and documents 4 elements of psychotherapy associated with good outcomes. In this module, we applied the Common Factors Model to case management in work with children and families. We showed how these 4 factors work in individual cases. Each of the factors contributes to case outcome. External influences appear to be the most powerful, followed by relationships, optimism, motivation, and service provider skills. When things go well, it is likely that things are going well in each of the 4 factors. When things do not go well, there is likely to be something going wrong in one or more of the 4 factors. None of these factors individually lead to good outcomes, but together they do. Knowledge of the common factors can help service providers to work more effectively with service users. Service providers must be especially sensitive to external influences because they are the most significant factors in outcome. In addition, it is important to keep in mind how connected the four factors are.